Hello everyone, you're listening to 99.1 FM on CJAM. Welcome to the Magna Carta Radio Show.
Magna Carta is a show run by the Pro Bono Students of Canada, and we're speaking on behalf of the University of Windsor's chapter of that.
PBSC is on a mission to provide free legal support to people and communities facing barriers to justice. With 22 chapters throughout Canada, we are the largest pro bono organization in the country. Our goal with the program is to provide you all with accessible information about relevant legal issues affecting our community.
So, if you guys don't remember, my name is Vurjeet.
And my name is Nick.
And this is actually our very last episode of the year. I'm feeling nostalgic already.
Don't say that. It's not over. We'll be back next time.
Hopefully. I don't know if you guys will maybe have different hosts next year and we'll be like running the behind the scenes possibly.
But no, this has been such a treat to really increase that access to justice and chat with you about really pressing legal issues in the Windsor area and Canada and at large.
Absolutely. I mean, let's think back to the episodes we've done. The first one, what was that even on? I can't even remember. I know we did a contracts crash course. I really enjoyed that.
We did a crim law crash course and we focused
sexual
in on
assault.
Yep.
Yeah. That was our first episode. And then most recently we did intellectual property and its relation to AI.
And AI in the legal field itself.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, we've covered a lot of wonderful topics, but let's just reflect for a second on ending our 1L. It's one of 3 years in law school.
It has flown by so fast.
Right?
I didn't have much time to process getting into law school, so, every single day has just been a blessing, and I feel like I've thrown myself into, a bunch of student clubs. I'm in student government.
Yeah.
I'm doing this amazing project
Nick is
now.
an extracurricular guy.
Gotta balance the resume out a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
And, no, everything that I've done has been really pivotal to my purpose for coming to law school, which is to actually increase access to justice for more marginalized groups or, people who don't have that fair access.
That's a great reflection. Yeah, one thing that I always talk to my friends from home and even my family about ever since being here and now with this ending, I've been thinking about it a lot more, is just truly how, for better or for worse, I feel like I think very differently now. Just in the way that I, approach anything. Yep. It's for example, last night I was talking to my sister. She was working on some, she's in the STEM field. She was, analyzing some microscope images for something, and I don't know how we started I was super tired. It was at 1:30 and she was working, but she wanted to stay on FaceTime, and I was like, okay, Cushy, her name's Cushy. I was like, Cushy, you cannot yap this much. I'll stay on the phone with you. But then I would yap to her, right? And then she got really annoyed. And then I started telling her about the flaws in her logic for getting annoyed about it.
Wow.
And then she was like, can you never do that again, please?
So in short, you are an all-star sister. I'll say
that.
Yeah. No, not only have my mom and I gotten into very interesting debates and talks, but she's also started to ask me for advice, which has been so weird.
Legal advice?
Not legal advice. My mom is not doing anything crazy, but just advice in general. I think this experience has really honed in my ability to process information. I think that's been one thing.
Totally. Yeah. And for any folks that maybe have kids that are thinking about law school or maybe, a prospective law student here listening today, one thing that I really think is a key takeaway that I've taken from this first year that I'm so happy about is, I guess, more confidence in being able to approach potential conflicts. I've very much always been the type who's okay, no conflict over anything. But for example, this is another example, and this happened on Valentine's Day, and that really pissed me off. It was Valentine's Day, and I remember I was I just had work planned for the day, and there were supposed to be some guys from Costco that were gonna come deliver a washing machine and a dryer. And the entire, kind of interaction was a bit frustrating. They wanted me to sign a contract saying that they had delivered it and installed it before, I even saw if they had installed it properly. I won't yap about this too much. All my friends know that I've literally just been talking about it. Point is, me standing my ground in that moment and being actually, you know what, I'll sign this contract at the end. I just want to make sure it's installed properly. That is not something that I think 8 months ago.
I think we talked in the contract law, crash course, is that you have a right to process. You have a right to think.
Exactly.
And sometimes people in power often try to force your hand into doing things that you don't want to do. So it's amazing that you've had that experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's just learning that exactly, like, you can pause, you can contemplate, and just because someone on the other end is the one with the contract doesn't mean you have zero rights and immediately have to sign. And so I think that's something that at least has come into practice for me recently, these past couple months.
And speaking of that, like, back and forth and taking a pause, Vurjeet and I, we just completed our moots. Have you completed yours?
Yes, I did.
I was first. I was terrified at first.
Yeah.
And then we sat down, we had our gowns on.
Right. Let's explain what a moot is real quick.
Great. Yeah. So a moot has a lot to do with oral advocacy. There are usually two parties. One is raising an appeal to like a past case decision. There's an appellant, and then there's the respondent. And in this case, the appellant was someone that had been accused of a drug offense.
It was about warrantless searches and everything.
Yep. And the respondent, of course, was the Crown. So I had an awesome opportunity to go first, get it over with.
Right.
And
did you prefer that?
Oh, yeah. No, I had a great time. It was so much fun. The questions, it was like a volley back and forth. We had a little bit of a hot bench, but it was fun.
Honestly, that's like, so the practice of this, by the way, folks, is often referred to as litigation, kind of the involvement of oral advocacy, right? Talking in front of justices, judges, all of that. And so all of us 1Ls, we got the chance to kind of experience that in a practice format, in a kind of low stakes format in the past month.
How did you feel about it?
Honestly, can I be so real?
Did it change your perceptions? Because honestly, going into that first moot, I was thinking this might make or break whether I want to go into litigation.
Totally.
And it's a hard yes. I want to go. I want to do all the moots.
Okay.
Like, it was so much fun. It was the best time.
That's the thing is, like, so we had to submit that really long
factum.
Yeah, that factum that honestly
it made or break relationships.
Everybody was so dead by the end of it. So that factum made me kind of think like, oh my god, like I'm tired of this matter as a whole, like I want to be over with it. But
better get used to that sort of research, Vurjeet. That's what we're going to be doing in the upcoming summers.
Yeah, I think it was also because it was the first one, right? Like it's always toughest when you know the least, but obviously it was a good experience. And then the moot itself, not gonna lie, I just enjoyed it. Like I had a feeling, like I might like this. I came out of that feeling so confident in my oral advocacy like abilities. I was like,
it was great to hear feedback. So in a moot, both of the appellant and the respondent, you speak one at a time. There are 4 people, and you're basically grilled by judges. So you really have to know your case, and it felt very validating to hear our feedback afterwards.
Absolutely.
Much of what was constructive. Because it was so many of our first times doing this. But to be confident enough to go up there and not stumble and, keep a good pace and get feedback like that felt really great, especially when I can only speak for myself, but like the prospect of litigating for someone who, can't represent themselves because of barriers to access to justice. I think it was a really special experience that I'm going to look back on fondly.
Of course, yeah. Honestly, I loved it. And I guess just 1L in general, I came into law school thinking, okay, I might like this, I might not. I'm doing a bit of a gamble. Like I know I'll be hopefully, not that I know, but I know that my skills are well suited to the field. But I'm just so happy with how much I've actually enjoyed the learning,
I have to agree with you. I mean, we come from both of our backgrounds are a lot of reading. Yeah. It's lots of reading, lots of synthesizing, lots of writing.
Yeah.
And it didn't feel like, obviously the multitude of what we have to do and the pace of it is much different than our undergraduate degrees.
Yeah.
But in substance, it has been so amazing. It hasn't been too horrifying.
But at times maybe, but like times. In a quirky, fun way that I'll laugh when I look back at it.
Yeah. I never cried.
Never tears? What is that?
What
is that word? I don't even, I never heard that.
I'm going to tell all the prospective law students, we have both gotten 8 hours of sleep every single night. That's not true. But no, 1L has been so amazing. I wouldn't change anything about it. I think one big piece of advice that me and Vurjeet could probably give, but anyone listening to this, is that things work out how they're supposed to work out, and as long as you keep on going, don't stop.
Absolutely.
If things knock you down, just keep on working, because everything's gonna work out. You're gonna be fine.
Absolutely.
I say that to myself every day.
Totally. And I like that we're like taking a chance to share these reflections, because I'm sure there's people that know of people, at least here, that are thinking about the field. Like, I wish I knew more people to be able to talk about it. Yeah. Like, truly, I think being able to hold a sense of confidence in yourself goes a long way, and also trusting the process. And the thing you said about patience really stuck to me. There's a word in Punjabi, it's called sabr, right? I took a gap year after my undergrad, and it was very kind of up and down, not the way that I expected my gap year to be. One thing that I learned from that process, like at the time I was like, what is going to happen? Like, where am I going to go?
I can't imagine that. I remember me as well. It was a big waiting game.
Yeah.
Waiting to hear back. I thankfully got in right after undergrad, but that summer of waiting was terrifying. It is the worst feeling ever to get your hopes up. It's like a roller coaster of emotions, and I agree. Patience is a virtue.
Yeah, and I guess... yeah, just knowing, like, having a little bit of faith in yourself that whether this is the field, whether it's another field, whether it's one step that will make you realize that, this wasn't the field for you, everything kind of falls into place eventually.
And I will echo that sentiment and say that people coming to law school, there are so many people from different walks of life. It doesn't matter if it takes you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Like,
totally.
There are people of all ages here.
All backgrounds.
Anything can happen. Trust that process.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think on that note, I think it's really important that we get into our topic for today, our very last topic, Vurjeet. How do you feel? It's been a rough ride.
It's been
a good
fun.
Ride. It's been a good ride.
I'm feeling super grateful for this opportunity. I feel like being able to sit down with you, Nick, yap about the things that talk about the things that we've learned, the things that we liked learning, the things that we found confusing,
and new things to learn as well.
Absolutely, things that we haven't touched on in school that we've still been able to because of this project. It is just like the biggest privilege, I'm so happy about it. Yeah. Okay. Time to get into it.
No, but seriously, thank you to PBSC for giving us this amazing opportunity, and our supervisors as well have just been phenomenal.
Yeah, shout out Cindy and Radha. We love you guys.
So, our topic today is free speech and social media. What can you actually say online, and what happens if you cross the legal line?
Totally. And, this matter, it's one that's very relevant. Social media is not just isolated to the Gen Z experience, or like, what is it, Gen Alpha, the babies that have the iPads?
There's a new generation already?
Yeah.
We're getting aged out?
We're getting aged out.
My goodness.
Like, all those slang terms that I'm not even going to say them on here.
Please don't say them.
Yeah. But they're ones that
it.
children know that I have no idea what they're saying, and it really makes me confused.
I already feel like what do we call them? Boomers. I've been called a boomer.
You feel like
I've been called a boomer. I don't have the only social media I have is Instagram, and I guess does LinkedIn count?
Yeah, except that's not like
I can't. It's hard to go on there sometimes.
Yeah, no.
Vurjeet and I are certified LinkedIn warriors.
Oh.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we are, but it's part of the process.
Yeah. But I think
funny.
it's important before we get into the social media crux is what exactly is free speech? So I'm going to give you a quick refresher. We actually just covered this in constitutional law. Section 2B of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects our freedom of expression.
Totally. So the exact wording, when you read it off that charter, is the freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. So let's break that down a bit. It's about expressing your opinion, being able to hold any opinion, no matter what it is.
And I think it's important that these are all rights that we do have under the Charter. But as we'll see in a bit, There are other sections of the Charter.
Yeah.
Section 1, for instance,
Section 1.
that basically gives a reasonable limit to your rights. And that's where the law comes in, because it's all about breaking down what exactly constitutes reasonability when discussing, what is a thought, what is a valid thought, what is a reasonable belief, an opinion, and an expression. And, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, no, exactly. And that's, that Section 1 is really interesting. It's not found, nothing like it is kind of in the States. Like the States are neighbors downstairs. And what's really interesting is that it kind of, it puts limits on these rights. These rights are not the be-all and end-all of what we, what we have.
I can tell Vurjeet is going to be a great prosecutor against people with their rights. It's not the be-all and end-all.
Be-all and end-all.
I take the opposite stance. I think our rights are so important to the fabric of being a Canadian.
No, and I agree with you, Nick. I guess in terms of reasonable limits, it's important to understand that there are legal consequences to everything. So if you express yourself, let's say that expression in the process of it violates certain criminal laws or defamation laws, or maybe it's, related to hate speech provisions, then there are those limits, and those can be applied, those can be discussed in court. So that's just to say, if you are in court and there's a matter related to something you've said, saying right away that, I have my right to this, it's baked into the Charter, that's not the end of the discussion.
And speaking of trouble, let's actually talk about defamation. People love to rage tweet about businesses, politicians, or even their exes. I've actually seen some of Vurjeet's Instagram stories. They
are you
pretty
saying?
Political. I'm kidding,
Yeah,
folks.
I have no idea what you're referring to right now.
But the question really is how far can you go before, it becomes legally risky or potentially unreasonable?
Mm-hmm. And that's a good question. Defamation is it defamation? Defamation? Defamation. My bad. Wow. Defamation in Canada is when you make a false statement that damages someone's reputation in the process. And so guess what? This is not just if you say it out loud. Social media counts completely for this. It's writing. It's honestly arguably an even stronger kind of example of it. So let's say I tweet something completely and utterly false about Nick. Okay, I just am lying. I am lying and lying and lying.
You know what? This is sounding more like reality every second you keep
Why
going.
is Nick trying to... This is a reverse defamation going on right now.
So basically, if Vurjeet were to tweet something really horrible, I mean, we have to constitute what really horrible is, but we'll get to that.
Yeah.
If Vurjeet were to defame me, I could sue,
Yeah.
even if you delete it, because your digital footprint, it tracks. It tracks forever. It's scary. So if an influencer falsely accused a restaurant of food poisoning, they could get sued for millions of dollars, right?
Totally, yeah. Millions we'd have to see. It depends on what the courts decide. But it is worth noting that Canadian courts don't really play around with this matter. Unlike the States, where plaintiffs have to prove something called actual malice, so a malicious intent, like a very I think it's a higher threshold. Canada has stronger protections for people's reputations here, and our precedent kind of shows that. So you can still be liable for defamation, even if you didn't intend to harm someone.
Absolutely. And a great example of is the case of Baglow and Smith, where the Ontario Court of Appeal had to decide whether a blogger's online comments were defamatory.
Mm-hmm.
And the court ruled that even in a heated online database, defamatory comments can still lead to liability.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff.
So in the same strand of defamation, we also go into hate speech. That is a very serious thing in Canada. It can get very serious with criminal punishment.
Absolutely, because it's something that's embedded in Canada's criminal code. And let me just remind you guys what the code is. It's this fat book, okay, that we all have to buy, all law students.
Can I be completely honest, Vurjeet?
What? Did you not get it?
Professor Jones never said we had to get it.
Really?
It's actually online. You can all download it for free, everyone. Some law professors like to scare you into buying that book, but it is free online.
Can I be honest though? I much prefer the book version. I don't like the way it's set out.
Control F is a powerful tool.
I don't know. Something about having the book in your hand, even though it's like really chunky and
I know someone in 1L actually that only has like 2 of their books.
Oh,
and the rest of them are online. I could never do that. I do love holding the book.
I know, but especially like for me, I'm often traveling back and forth to Toronto to visit friends, or I fly back home in Saskatoon. And I remember first reading week, I took my fat criminal law textbook with me, and
that's
now
not even the biggest one. The worst is constitutional. Absolutely,
guys. If you guys saw that book,
it is. I think it's over 1,000 pages for sure.
Oh yeah, I think it's closer to like
and
1,600.
The print and folks, when you get that textbook, the print on that textbook is probably about size 8 in the most illegible.
We're scaring people away right now. Don't say that. No, guys, it's actually size 60, so don't stress about it.
My eyesight is not what it used to be. After this year. That's one thing.
Yeah, so I guess the online textbooks are good for that, right? And I found one for crim this semester, so it's been really good because now I can hop around from different places and I don't have to carry around that heavy textbook with me. But yeah, I was talking about the criminal code. So it's this book and also available online, and it consolidates all of the actual criminal acts that Canada has set out as fully criminal. So it's worth noting that criminal acts are not, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, I'm pretty sure, they're not something that can be expressed through common law, so precedent. It's only through the actual book. And that's specific to the actions, the illegal criminal actions.
Yeah, and that's mostly because the federal legislature is in charge of criminal offenses and making those laws. Mm-hmm. And it's up to the common law to interpret, I think, is what we're trying to say here.
Right. So in an example related to hate speech, if the hate speech incites violence or potentially promotes like very substantive hatred against a group, that can lead to criminal charges. So that's an example of a situation where, tweets or maybe a comment on Instagram, a post on Instagram, it could lead to criminal charges if it gets that serious.
So a serious example would be a case like the Queen and Keegstra. So this case involved a teacher spreading anti-Semitic hate speech in the classroom, and it set a precedent for what constitutes hate speech under the Canadian law. So courts have upheld that certain extreme speech isn't protected when it promotes hatred against identifiable groups like I just talked about. And there are certain other cases as well. I can't remember the name of it, but it doesn't matter how you express yourself, whether that be online, to your friends in a public space. There are cases where individuals have passed out pamphlets with homophobic or racist content, and the courts have ruled that is hate speech. So I just want to harken back on this because it took me a second to grasp to when we talked about charter rights. You have a right to hand out that pamphlet. However, the repercussions of what happens as set by case law precedent is that if it incites violence or leads people to incite violence,
right,
that's when your rights can be limited.
Right.
And it's really important to remember that, even if someone posts something racist, for any of you on Instagram, if you go through the comments on certain posts, it's some of the most heinous things.
Oh my God.
So people can say that. And for most people generally, if Vurjeet commented some horrible thing on my Instagram post,
why are you beefing with me today?
I would not take something up against her in the court of law, right? But you can't just say, "Oh, that's just my opinion," if what you have said incites violence against a group or exposes them to hatred. It's a very serious thing. So we talked about that fine line before. have to be very cognizant of that.
Yeah, and Nick, what we're talking about, it actually reminds me of a case that I read in my constitutional law class. Again, I don't remember the name, I don't have it memorized, but it was a matter related to someone who had spread pamphlets that was related to kind of like hatred towards the Jehovah's Witness community in Quebec, and this was many, many years ago. It's an old case, but I remembered they applied charter rights to really examine like how far does your right to expression really go, you know?
Absolutely. And it just came to the tip of my tongue, the case that I was talking about the individual who was, handing out pamphlets. That was I think the Saskatchewan Human Rights Code against Walcott.
Oh.
And Walcott.
Okay.
I got to remember that. And actually Walcott came to Windsor a few years ago to spread his message of, pretty sure it was homophobia.
Oh yeah,
so
I was just gonna ask, like, what was?
So he's still out there. It doesn't matter that the courts ruled in favor of the Human Rights Code.
Yeah, because nobody can stop him from
no
actually
one can
sharing
stop him from
his
sharing
opinion.
his opinions. It's just whether or not it's under that reasonable limits clause.
That is so interesting.
But since we're talking about more of a social media aspect to it,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about the Queen and Elliot.
Yeah, and this is a great example of a different kind of version of what free speech and social media looks like, and that is online threats and harassment, right? So we've covered, up until this point, let me do a quick recap. We covered defamation, right? We talked about hate speech. And now this is another kind of example. It's threats and harassment.
So this case really put online harassment laws in the spotlight.
Mm-hmm. So the main person in this case, Gregory Allen Elliott, he was charged with criminal harassment for his tweets directed at two women. The case raised a lot of questions about the line between online disagreement and harassment. And this is where statutory interpretation becomes so crucial. Statutory interpretation, two very long words, but it basically just means the kind of embedded words in the law, and that is what I recited to you guys earlier, what's set in the charter. How do courts go about kind of interpreting every word in that, okay, separately first, and sometimes there's definitions in the code and stuff, but further, what does that interpretation look like when we're looking at it as a whole, right? So there's a lot of different steps, different layers to kind of understanding how courts go about interpreting the charter and the charter related to specific contexts. Each situation is uniquely different. But obviously, we cannot just be dilly-dallying and applying laws differently to each case, right? It becomes extremely important and a priority of the case to be at least really kind of prioritize some degree of consistency when applying. And when words can be interpreted so differently, it becomes even more crucial to try to interpret it in a manner that is consistent with the precedent that's set.
Right. And going back to the case, because his messages weren't explicitly threatening, the sheer volume and persistence of his tweets are what made the women feel unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what's key about criminal harassment. It doesn't require direct threats. If your conduct causes someone to fear for their safety, even if it's just online, it can still become a crime.
Exactly. And so here, folks, the conduct was more than just the words that were said. It was the repetition, and how the repetition kind of clarified an intent to incite fear.
So when you look back at Section 2B of the Charter and the freedom of expression, you also have to look at Section 1, which is the reasonable limits clause. And there's a test for reasonability. I believe it's the Oakes test. Correct?
I think so, yeah.
Great. So, sending 50 tweets a day to someone who doesn't want to engage with you, that was ruled as unreasonable. It's not just annoying, it's illegal. So don't bother people, okay, guys?
Don't bother people when they don't want to be bothered. If they're not answering your text, I guess this is so funny. This just feels like something out of a movie.
Oh, I was about to say, I thought you were going to say it's something out of my daily life. I was like, Vurjeet,
Just me going about my day,
Double,
like just
triple,
constantly
quadruple.
harassing people via
Quadruple
text all the time. That is my main priority. I'm not like ever doing readings or anything. I'm just actually on my phone texting different people constantly.
That's what you've been doing in the library the past couple
Yeah,
months,
I just sit there in the corner. And I open my laptop so people think
really
that I'm
painting
working.
a picture here.
And really, I choose one person a day, and I'm just bugging them. Okay, enough now.
Yep.
This is a bit, guys. Please, everybody understand that this is a bit. I'm not actually doing that.
Jumping back into social media, I think it's also important to talk about algorithmic censorship and free speech.
Mm-hmm.
That's been a big deal in Canada recently. So let's talk about algorithms. A lot of people feel like social media companies are silencing certain voices through content moderation and AI-driven censorship. And I think that really does raise those free speech concerns. When someone has the power to control content, it's kind of frightening, and it feels a bit scary, I will say.
I so agree, and honestly, this is such an interesting topic. Like, algorithms shape a lot of our life without us realizing it now. And I know that we kind of touched on that when we were talking about tech as a whole in our last episode. But truly, there's so much up in the air. And I think that's what leads it to be controversial, right? Social media platforms use algorithms to filter content, to make it more kind of tailored towards you. But since they're private companies, they aren't legally bound to uphold free speech like, say, the government is, right?
And we look at, charter cases, and you think about stuff, it's usually the government and an individual, not a company and an individual. So we rope ourselves into free speech discussions when, people make claims that private companies have committed crimes against them as per the criminal code. So that's one big difference. And I wanted to echo what Vurjeet said about algorithms shaping our lives. The sort of content that we take in, it really bases a lot of people's perceptions on the world and shapes our, those opinions, those beliefs, and everything. So it's a very big deal, considering that most people do get their information from online platforms that are privately owned. Mm-hmm. So when political content or controversial topics get flagged more than others, I'm not sure if there's much recourse if someone thinks they were unfairly censored, or if a certain issue was unfairly censored.
Yeah, no, there isn't, from my understanding either. You can challenge moderation decisions through platform appeals, but there's no legal right to be heard on a private platform. However, there have been some discussions about regulating big tech's control over online speech because, let's think about it, right? Like, the ability to remove posts, shadow ban accounts, kind of hide certain sensitive political content.
And these applications like Instagram, for instance, any app, they have their terms and conditions that kind of govern their apps. And I don't know for sure if those regulations are in congruence with charter protected rights and reasonable limits clauses, because you don't have a judge or an adjudicator, deciding who gets banned or who doesn't. And
I guess in this conversation, something that's really important to consider is how much of a monopoly is over a lot of our social media. Like, when Meta came about, something that really blew my mind was all these individual apps that I had, they were now interconnected randomly. Right? So I think, what is it? WhatsApp, which is what my grandparents are obsessed with. WhatsApp, and then there's Instagram.
Incoming law students, be prepared to use WhatsApp. So anyone with, family history in WhatsApp, you're well prepared for law school.
Yeah.
Every single group chat is running out of there.
Yeah, which honestly I don't prefer it, but I get it, because in my mind, WhatsApp, so I come from a South Asian background. Nick does as well. But I think people of certain backgrounds, they have communities that tend to prefer WhatsApp more. So WhatsApp for me is like my extended family, like social media, like app, where it's like when I'm wishing somebody a happy birthday, when we're talking about some type of celebration of some sort. I have certain group chats that literally have like all of my grandparents' siblings, all of their kids, and then the kids of all of those kids. So certain group chats are fully on mute for me because I'm getting good morning texts every day, which is sweet. It's nice.
But big tech does control apps like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. It's overwhelming. And speaking to control, I think another really important point before we take our short break is that there's a lot of misinformation online. Mm-hmm. There has been a lot of debate about whether governments should regulate fake news online. And fake news is such a triggering thing to hear, considering it gets thrown around so often. And, now there are certain ads and pop-ups on Instagram, for instance, because that's all I use, that do say that certain things could be potentially false or that they haven't gone through an adjudicator of some kind.
Right. So, folks, we'll get into this next topic of regulating misinformation and fake news after the break. We'll see you guys. Don't miss us too much.
We'll be right back.
Hello, folks. You're listening to 99.1 FM on CJAM. My name is Vurjeet, and I'm here with my co-host, Nick.
And this is the Magna Carta.
Magna Carta Radio Show. We're speaking on behalf of the pro bono students of Canada, specifically the University of Windsor's Faculty of Law.
And PBSC is on a mission to provide free legal support to people and communities facing barriers to justice. With 22 chapters throughout Canada, we are the largest pro bono organization in the country. Our goal with this program is to provide you all with accessible information about relevant legal issues affecting our community.
And today we've been touching on social media and free speech. And before we go into a quick recap of what topics we've covered, I just want to give you guys a little refresher on exactly the wording of the charter that we're focusing on today. So that is Section 2B of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and it's the one that protects our freedom of expression. The wording is freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including freedom of the press and other media of communication. So today we're really talking about what are kind of the ramifications, the implications of people who decide to express thoughts, opinions that maybe have kind of a domino effect, can possibly incite violence, or maybe they're controversial, right? So up until this point, we've talked about hate speech and social media laws. We've talked about what's baked into the criminal code as illegal. Hate speech is fully criminalized in Canada. We've also talked about kind of the phenomenon of online threats and harassment, and the fact that and further defamation. Specifically, something that we talked about related to defamation was how Canada is, comparatively to the U.S., more kind of rigid about its rights when it comes to individuals' reputations. That means even if someone wasn't intending to harm someone's reputation, they may still deal with some legal issues on the matter.
Absolutely. And yeah, we talked a lot about hate speech. We talked a lot about hatred and expressions of hatred. And it's important to look back at a case decision called Whatcott, where hatred was objectively interpreted to determine whether a reasonable person would view the expression as exposing a vulnerable group to discrimination. So again, everyone has the right to express themselves freely, but unfortunately, if it doesn't pass that reasonable standard threshold, which is, like Vurjeet said, a lot lower than the States, you could be facing a lot of trouble with the criminal law.
And now, everyone, we're transitioning into the topic of regulating misinformation and fake news. Nick, why don't you lead us into this topic?
Perfect. It's a pretty tricky topic. I mean, fake news has been just a huge thing thrown around at us by politicians, by moderators, all over the place. It's overwhelming, the amount of things that aren't true, especially with the advent of AI and the creation of just fake images, fake videos, fake everything. It's scary and to not know what reality really is. So Canada has laws against defamation and fraud, but there's no real specific laws criminalizing misinformation unless it crosses into unreasonable limits and harmful areas like false advertising, election interferences, or public safety threats.
Mm-hmm. So, like when people spread false health information during the pandemic, what do you think? Where does that fit into this?
Exactly. The government tried to combat that through public education and content warnings, but it's a fine balance between stopping harm and protecting free speech. There's really no law against just being wrong.
And you know what? That kind of does make logical sense, right? Like spreading, like in my mind, I'm like, so many people can be wrong, not intentionally, or like it just seems like too large of a scope to criminalize in any degree. What do you think?
I think I would have to agree with you, and I think with what's going on now, like I said, with AI, with people really tracking down and digging their teeth into misinformation and fake news, that we're going to have a lot of cases that are probably going to bring a lot of clarity towards what the government actually has to say about this topic.
Yeah, and I think it's situations like these where there isn't an exact law, right, criminalizing it, is when we rely more on common law precedents. So our courts are really going to rely on what areas is kind of like there's less leeway and what areas have more leeway. But currently, wrong opinions are not criminalized. So if you tweet that the earth is flat,
you might get roasted, but
you won't get arrested. Okay, folks, transitioning into kind of another branch of this conversation is a little bit of a hot topic, and that is cancel culture, right? People say getting banned from Twitter, or X as it's known now, is a violation of free speech. But it's worth asking, is it really?
Legally, no. Social media platforms are private companies, not governments. They can set their own rules, and if you violate them, they can kick you off.
This is so interesting because the Charter really only protects you from government restrictions on free speech, not company policies. But
absolutely, but there are other regulations set forth by the government other than the Charter of Rights that protect people as well. So it's important to recognize that as well. So online, when people are like, my free speech is being violated after they get banned, they're kind of wrong.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's just, I feel like it's really interesting because if you compare kind of our environment to what it was, generations ago, so much of our daily life is being shaped by things that aren't as regulated by the government, right? Social media is ever changing, and as cool as that is for us, it's also legally sometimes a bit of a problem because how can courts keep up with these changes and make sure that people's rights are still being protected if literally, it's absolutely insane to me how quickly things change in the tech sphere. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, I understand what you're saying, but actually, Vurjeet, I think I can kind of help you there. I can't remember the case off the top of my head, but one of the things that the court looks at when deciding what is like a reasonable use of, your free speech is the location of where you have used your free speech. So online platforms are moderated by private companies, and that's why people don't have that access to free speech there. But if you were to bring that free speech to a public space, out of your own home kind of thing, then you have more grounds to have that protection of your free speech. Right. But the minute you start to impede in a different location or a different means of expressing yourself, so online or perhaps at a church or in a school, just like the Queen and Keegstra, that's when you start to make infringements. So the court does have a way of creating a reasonable space of where free speech is allowed.
Right, and I don't know, that I just find that so interesting. Like the fact that location can play a role. I don't know. It's really cool to me how courts navigate ever-changing kind of industries to make sure that things are still being handled as much as they can handle it.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty of the law, is that everything is contextual, but the decisions made in court are able to be applied to other contexts as well. And it's just that continuous navigation. It's insane and it's fascinating, and it's why I love being in law school.
Yes.
So.
And folks, as we get closer and closer to wrapping our last episode up, I want to take one moment to talk about maybe the takeaways that you can have from this episode beyond just learning, right? So in terms of understanding your rights to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, it's important to know, exactly like Nick was mentioning in relation to one of the cases we were talking about, that you have the right to say whatever you want to say, but the implications that come from that can also be attached to it. So it's important to kind of understand maybe the string, the thread that threads through your rights, right?
I think it's also important to recognize that Canada does care about free speech, but it also cares about keeping its reasonable limits.
Yeah, Section 1.
Section 1 is powerful. The Charter is so powerful. There are so many rights. I urge everyone to make sure that they are aware of their rights and what they include. And whether that means you come to law school, you become a paralegal, anything in the justice system. And even if you're not interested in the justice system, it's really important to know your rights so you can protect yourself against unfairness and infringements to set rights.
And Nick, along with that, I think another arguably more kind of simple takeaway is just the fact that you should think before you post. Think before you tweet.
Before you speak.
Before you speak.
It's crazy that we're in a generation now where we just said, like, tweet or text or like that, and we didn't think of speech as the first thing.
Right.
That is so crazy.
Yeah. I mean, specifically to social media, though, it is important. I do think, like, it's just really think before you're putting your maybe more controversial opinions out there. We care about you guys, but also maybe the Instagram trollers out there that are listening to this, possibly rethink what you're doing just a little bit. I would say that's my personal opinion on it. My personal piece of advice to you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a pleasure. We've covered defamation, hate speech, online threats, harassment, and again, I think the biggest takeaway here is that our freedom of speech is not absolute, just like all of your rights. People love to throw them at, I have a right to life, liberty, security, a person. Right. And it's like, yes, you do. But... Yeah.
Okay, guys, I mean, that is kind of the end of our topic. I just want to express so much gratitude once again to all of the listeners. Being able to speak with my co-host here this year during kind of what was at least a transition for me, entering like a completely new city. Like I mentioned, I'm from Saskatoon, and being able to kind of have an outlet to be able to really reflect on the information that we've been learning. It's just been such a pleasure, and I really think I'm gonna think about this experience for a long time.
I have to echo that sentiment. I came from Toronto. Windsor is a totally different city, and this has given, alongside my other extracurriculars, has given me a sort of stability amidst this transition period. So I appreciate that first and foremost. I will say that I feel like we've succeeded in our mission of, increasing access to justice. So that is great. And no, I'm so grateful to be here. And I would like to tell all the Windsorites out there, if you are in need of legal aid or just help or advice, we have clinics in downtown Windsor. Yeah. I think it's that
our students actually work at.
And our I have tons of friends that work there. Yeah. So there's Legal Assistance of Windsor, LAW, and then there's also CLA. Yeah. And
CLA Community Legal Aid, right?
Yep. Yeah. Take advantage of what the law has to offer you.
And see it less as, I feel like, especially being outside of the industry, it's like it feels so...
It feels impenetrable at some points.
Yeah, it feels like kind of like there's just no way to fully understand it, right? And I know, like, we're speaking only as first years right now. We are babies. Like, we are babies in this big world. But I think one thing that I'm already learning from 1 year of being a baby in this field is the fact that it is not as intimidating as I think we often think it is.
I think I understand what you're saying. I think first of all, I think we put up a lot of barriers ourselves.
Absolutely.
You know, it looks like a mountain, it might just be a molehill. Not to say that getting into law school is simple at all. It was not. It is challenging, and there are lots of barriers that stop a lot of people from going here.
Mm-hmm.
But especially to people who are not interested in law, that are just listening to this to, increase information.
Yeah. Listen as they're doing something, maybe.
Yeah. The laws, the charter, anything like that, there's a lot of legalese, and that it's a whole different language, and it is very difficult, and it's difficult to understand, and it has taken us a year to just start to grasp some of those core concepts, and it has been such a journey. So don't feel like you can't. You most certainly can. And there are outlets for you to resources to better understand your rights, the laws, and the law is everywhere. It is everywhere. It is inescapable. So like our technologies, you kind of just have to throw yourself into it and
exactly treat it like a friend. Treat it like a friend and not an enemy. And I think it helps you kind of understand where you are situated. Law is one of those things where it's just like, exactly like you said, it's inescapable. It shapes literally every part of our life. Like, I cannot think of a facet of my life that it does not shape. And I think that's why I think this radio show is so cool, because you're not learning about something technical in just one area. I feel like what is just, and I could honestly go about this forever, but truly it's the fact that it branches over everything. Like you learn about everything when you learn about the law. And maybe that's just coming from two kids that really like it.
Two
and maybe
keeners. Yeah, no, I think this has also helped us tone that creative side. I know that certain people that feel like the law has kind of stripped them of creativity.
Yeah.
But I think we just have to remember to repivot and to think about the law as intrinsically creative, because we're constantly, like we were talking about today, navigating and interpreting and figuring out how to make things different. And I think that's what makes law beautiful.
That is such a great way to kind of wrap it up, Nick.
Yeah.
Okay, folks.
It has been the biggest pleasure.
Yeah, it truly has. Yeah. We're going to wrap things up now. Thank you so much for listening. It means the absolute most to us. My name is Vurjeet.
And I'm Nick, and you're listening to 99.1 FM on CJAM. That's it for now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.